Everyone knows that Russia is clearly divided into two parts, Moscow and all the other regions, the poor. The social and financial gap is enormous. Moscow looks like something alien, like the only healthy spot on the body of a leper. Even in the so-called cultural capital, St. Petersburg, people live in conditions close to apocalyptic.
Obviously, you can't even really wash up there at all.
No.
What about electricity? Did they turn off electricity with water?
Yes.
Did simultaneously?
Well, yes, the power went out and, well, the television just turned off and I realized that there was nothing left.
And Moscow is thriving and blooming, living as if in a parallel reality where there hasn't been 3 years of full-scale war, no mobilization, no economic crisis, and where significantly more electricity is spent on lighting a single New Year's festive tree than in all of Krasnoyarsk.
If electricity were cheaper, there wouldn't be any problems. But you see, it's just too expensive, especially for pensioners, you know. I pay 1.5, 2,000, 1.5 to 2, but if I connected, it'd be 8 to 10,000. And then what do I live on? That's it.
A burning oil refinery in Tuapse, the bombing of Saratov, thousands of refugees from the Kursk region. None of this concerns Moscow. War is war, but you still have to book a table at the restaurant according to schedule. There are peasants from other regions to run meat assaults and tighten their belts. Moscow authorities even officially buy souls for the special military operation. So as not to send Muscovites to the slaughter while still meeting the recruitment quota for orcs, Moscow has indeed raised contract soldier payments to very astronomical heights and truly lures Russians from impoverished regions.
Almost 2 million rubles, and that's just for signing the contract. This is the kind of money now being used in the Russian capital to entice people to fight in Ukraine. The corresponding decree was signed by Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin.
After all, this isn't government budget money, it's money from the regions. So in this way, the federal center is effectively vacuuming up both people for the front and finances from the various regions, thereby consolidating its power.
What's truly cynical is that Moscow consistently drains all the finances and vital resources from the regions, leaving them utterly impoverished, and then uses their very own money to buy the lives of their residents.
Everyone understands perfectly well, I think, what price will have to be paid for this money and what will have to be given in return. Everyone, in general, has learned over the reporting period from their own bitter experience and that of others. What happens to people when they try to make a quick buck?
But in the third year of the so-called special military operation, Moscow is beginning to feel the war more and more acutely. Coffins and the wounded are coming back. Maybe not in such numbers as, say, to Buryatia, but it's already impossible not to notice them. Croissants and banana lattes at Patriarch's Ponds no longer go down with the same pleasure.
Please, if you would, kindly come over here. Do you have any pressing questions, dear representative of the law? How am I supposed to speak? Why? Well, ask them to turn off the music. Why are they here? While Russian people are being killed in the special military operation zone. They're having fun here. Why don't you forbid them from doing this? Your very own police officers, your esteemed colleagues are bravely dying there for the beloved motherland. And you allow this to happen here. What kind of mess is this? Tell me. As a participant in the special military operation, I'm asking you, what's going on in the minds of our people?
The residents of the Reich's capital were finally sobered up by a massive strike of Ukrainian drones. Moscow hasn't seen anything like this since the Second World War. Even the last dog on Rubliovka realized that the quiet and sweet life in a vacuum has come to an end. The authorities are trying to pretend that everything is just fine and wonderful. In the Moscow suburbs, during the celebration of the 8th of March, they even deliberately ignored the widows of fallen orcs because their gloomy faces spoil the atmosphere of joy and happiness.
The wife of the officer, a senior lieutenant, was invited to a concert on the 6th of March for an award ceremony. We were not given the award. When we were formally invited into the office, a woman named Christina, whom I was seeing for the very first time, said the following to us: the general public absolutely shouldn't well, see the sad and sorrowful faces of the officers' wives. It is important to maintain their dignity.
Your sad faces don't match the cheerful and happy women. So, as I understood it, we are not allowed to be on the same stage as happy women.
Muscovites don't want to see the sour face of war, and they don't want to fight either. That's why Moscow is a bomb planted under the foundation of Russia. The hardships of war, as expected, did not spark a popular uprising in the provinces. It's unlikely because people there are used to living in poverty and without rights, and the war hasn't really affected their standard of living since there was nowhere lower to fall.
In general, I'm satisfied with this life. There's bread, there's chicken, there's coffee. I'm not saying that it's all absolutely perfect, but as for electricity, I truly save and will certainly continue to keep saving. Guys left Krasnoyarsk, left the Ministry of Internal Affairs, left the Ministry of Emergency Situations, and 6 people were buried.
And the fact that men are dying in droves is even seen as a plus. There are fewer drunks on the streets, and you can make as much money from funeral payouts as an average teacher would earn in 30 years.
In the village, people support the special operation. When we were seeing all the mobilized men, we had such a parade. Everyone told the voice to come back with victory, only with victory. And at least I didn't hear any words like that. What is this for? Why is this necessary?
But Moscow is a completely different story. The longer the war goes on, the more it starts to affect this spoiled island of prosperity. And Muscovites, unlike people in the regions, have something to lose. They have a life truly worth fighting for. So when restaurants on Arbat begin to close their doors, when people are rounded up en masse for brutal meat grinder assaults, when hundreds of Ukrainian drones arrive every single night, Moscow will inevitably rise up.
FK, very on, Mao there.
The feeling is farther away.
The attack began around 4 in the morning. In Domodedovo, a drone fell onto the parking lot of the Mirator company. Cars caught fire there.
In fact, Muscovites are the most politically active population in the swamps. Moreover, Moscow is the most opposition-minded region in Russia. It is in Moscow that the main anti-Putin forces are concentrated. And it's not just the notorious liberals, but also outright cannibals who supported the invasion of Ukraine. But when the Blitzkrieg failed, they became disheartened and accumulated hatred toward the Kremlin old man for, in their view, squandering Russia's greatness and leading the pseudo-empire to defeat and ruin.
The current situation from the standpoint of management, military management, is extremely difficult. The way we are expanding personnel in a whole number of units, it's a nightmare, honestly. I would put it this way. It's not even really the Ministry of Defense's issue. For example, general positions. These are actually the military department of the Central Committee, well, the presidential administration. These are the relevant structures within the presidential administration. And in fact, the situation, for example, the migration situation, this was a mine deliberately planted under the country, now acknowledged by Western analytical centers. In other words, it was a deliberate act of sabotage within the country. This is a bomb already in place. The clock is ticking, is going to explode, and it will be very bloody.
Previously, Muscovites could be dispersed by Oman forces and the threat of administrative penalties. But when your very life is truly at stake, even the most seemingly apathetic crowd begins to act decisively and with great purpose. Let's be honest, it's better to get hit with a baton on Red Square than to get an FPV drone to the head near a Ukrainian tree line.
That's a bold statement. Of course, I'm not going to test it.
A Moscow uprising is inevitable because the very way of life in Moscow is under threat. At some point, a revolt against the Kremlin will unite imperialists, liberals, fascists, migrants, and especially the oligarchs. It's possible that even now there's a behind-the-scenes struggle among them over who will lead the revolution. The Kremlin understands this perfectly well, but for now they can't do anything because introducing preemptive repressions against Moscow would only accelerate the uprising.
Our guys are quite serious as well, and they're also very much unhappy with Moscow's hospitality.
And if you simply cannot defeat something, then you absolutely must lead it. Why wait until the masses storm into your very own office and completely tear you apart on a truly hated British flag? It's better, in the best traditions of Russian power, to eliminate the main irritant yourself, replace him with a double, or give him a ceremonious burial in the mausoleum. They could say, for example, that Putin was so worried about Russia that he couldn't eat and died of starvation.
Undoubtedly, this is something we all should truly and collectively work on together and strive for our common ultimate success.
But there are even more radical options. Hand the war criminal over to The Hague and go as witnesses yourselves. Who knows? You might even get a Nobel Peace Prize for that.
Is that really confirmed?
Of course, of course, of course.
Of course, we cannot entirely rule out an even more radical scenario, much like what happened to the Ceausescu family, who, as we know, were fed lead in their backyard to the cheers of the crowd. Even though just a day before that, he was given a 90% approval rating by the population. That's something for the pale Führer to think about.
This trend has become quite fashionable in many different countries around the world.
The irony is that Putin has surrounded himself entirely with people from the KGB and FSB. And these are professional schemers, political technologists, and regime destabilizers. They only defend and support a strong government. As soon as they fully realize that the established system has significantly weakened, and the overall situation is rapidly heating up, they might very well be among the first to attempt to stage a decisive coup.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.